At my wedding, my sister tossed the drink at me and said, "Here's to the family fraud in white." My mom rushed to her, saying, "She didn't mean it." I didn't respond. That night, I froze the shared bank account, but at 8:40 a.m., they got the real news. The university had withdrawn her enrollment. Payment failed. My mom called screaming. Everything was perfect until my sister Alyssa walked in. There was this incredible atmosphere, soft, glowing, almost cinematic. People were genuinely happy for us. Not just polite happy, but the kind of happy that comes from knowing you've earned something. The ceremony had gone flawlessly. Martin looked breathtaking. The venue glowed under the soft lights, and for once in a very long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Then she arrived late, loud, and wrapped in white. Not off-white, not champagne or pearl. No, a wedding white dress, long and dramatic. She didn't care. She never does. Alyssa walked in like the whole day had been about her, and somehow, without saying anything at first, she just sucked the energy out of the room. Even the music felt like it dipped for a second. People stared. Someone actually turned to me and asked if it was a joke, and still, we pretended we had to. Martin didn't deserve to have his night hijacked by my sister's theatrics. I kept glancing at him, half expecting him to cry or get upset, but he didn't. He just smiled at people, held my hand, and kept the vibe alive like the absolute king he is. That made it worse for me, knowing how much effort he was putting in to pretend Alyssa didn't exist. So I matched it. I laughed when I was supposed to. I danced. I thanked guests. I posed for photos I didn't want to be in anymore. All of it felt like walking on glass. What was supposed to be the happiest night of our lives turned into this quiet, emotional endurance test because Alyssa made sure we had to act like nothing happened. And we all knew it. We got through dinner, through the dances, through the speeches. People kept asking if I was okay, some of them noticing, some just guessing something was off. I shrugged them off. I wasn't about to let Alyssa win by turning the night into a mess. But she didn't need a full hour. She only needed 10 seconds. Near the end of the reception, just as things started to feel normal again, Alyssa stood up from her seat with a glass of red wine. The music was low. Everyone was laughing. A few guests were still making spontaneous toasts. I thought maybe, just maybe, she was going to try and smooth it over, pretend to be gracious for the sake of appearances. Instead, she turned to Martin, not me, and said, "Here's to the family fraud in white." And before anyone could react, she tossed the wine. She didn't aim for Martin. She aimed for me. It hit full on. Dark red splashed across my white dress, soaking through the lace, dripping down the bodice. It was so fast, so deliberate, that people didn't even process it right away. My uncle actually laughed, thinking it was a joke before realizing it wasn't. Then silence. A few people stood. One of Martin's cousins dropped her glass. And my mother, God help me. She ran toward Alyssa, grabbing her by the arm, muttering frantically. She didn't mean it. Of course she meant it. Alyssa never lets her anger sit quietly. She always burns the whole room just to feel like she's the one standing on the ashes. I didn't say a word. Not to her, not to my mom, not to anyone. I just walked away, cleaned up, changed into the backup dress I had stored just in case something happened. Not for this. Just for a spill or accident or maybe sweat. Not this. And then I came back out smiling again, pretending again, because Martin deserved to remember the night as perfect, no matter how badly my sister tried to poison it. But inside, I made a decision. That was the last time Alyssa would ever humiliate me. After everyone left, after the venue cleared and Martin fell asleep beside me, still glowing, still happy, I stayed up. I logged into the shared bank account, the one Alyssa had access to, the one I had funded for months for tuition, rent, emergencies, everything. The account that kept her life from falling apart while she played at being a victim. I froze it, locked it all down. No warning, no heads up. At 8:40 a.m., her school emailed her. Final payment bounced. Enrollment withdrawn. At 8:41, my phone rang. It was my mother screaming. I didn't answer the call. Not right away. I watched it ring while I sat at the kitchen counter sipping coffee. Martin was still asleep upstairs, and I didn't want to bring this chaos into our first full day as a married couple. The moment I picked up, it would start. The questions, the guilt tripping, the fake concern layered over rage. My mom would start with how devastated Alyssa was, then pivot to how I had overreacted. That's how it always went. So I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again and again. By the fifth missed call, a text came through, one sentence. She asked, "What did you do to your sister?" As if I had done something, I responded with a single word, nothing. Because I really hadn't. Not until now. And even this didn't feel like revenge. It felt like correction. For too long, I had bent over backward to keep Alyssa's life from crumbling. She blew her savings last year on some pyramid scheme her friend got her into. I bailed her out. She missed the grant deadline for school. I covered tuition. She crashed her car and didn't have insurance. I helped her find a rental. She never said thank you, just acted like it was owed to her. But what she did at the wedding, that crossed into something else. And for once, I let her deal with consequences. By noon, my dad called too. Unlike my mom, he wasn't dramatic, but he was blunt. He asked me if I understood how serious this was, that Alyssa had no way to fix this now, that the university wouldn't make exceptions because her sister was being petty, that she might lose the entire semester, possibly the year. I said, "Good." Silence on the line. Then he said something like, "You don't mean that." And I just told him he clearly didn't know me very well. That was the moment it started to shift. Because for years, they'd seen me as the one who could absorb everything, the one who never lost control, who always paid, always forgave, always kept peace. And they depended on that. They built their comfort on that, on me. Now I was the problem. But they didn't know the half of it because freezing the account, that was just the start. Later that afternoon, I logged into the insurance portal and removed her from the health plan I'd added her to. She never paid a dime for it, and it was only supposed to be temporary, just until she got on her feet. She'd been on it for almost 2 years. Quietly, I shut that door too. Then I went into the student loan portal, the one tied to my name, and changed the automatic payments I'd set up for her minimums. Canceled them. They'd default within a month unless she stepped in. I didn't say a word to her, and I didn't post about it online. I didn't make a scene or try to embarrass her the way she had me. I just let the ground beneath her quietly fall away. Because here's what no one in the family wanted to admit. Alyssa's entire stability came from me. Every good thing she had was either inherited from someone else's grace or bailed out when she messed it up. And when she decided to humiliate me at the one moment in my life that was supposed to be sacred, that was her cashing out the last of her credit. At dinner, Martin asked if I wanted to talk about what happened. I told him everything was already handled. He didn't ask for details, but he smiled a little. The next 2 days were quiet. Too quiet. No more screaming calls, no dramatic voicemails, just silence, which was almost worse because I knew what that meant. They were regrouping, trying to figure out how to spin it, how to get me back in line. I'd gone off script. That scared them more than anything. But the silence didn't last. By day 3, it began. It started small. My mom texting me a photo of Alyssa's old acceptance letter as if that somehow made a case for why I should fix everything. Then a message about how people make mistakes and how stress affects people in different ways and how weddings can be emotional. No mention of the wine, no apology, just passive phrases orbiting around what had happened like it was weather. I ignored all of it. Then she escalated. She sent Martin a message on Instagram. That was new. She called me controlling, said I was punishing Alyssa, and implied, without saying it directly, that Martin should watch for signs of that behavior. Martin read it out loud to me while we were brushing our teeth. We both just stared at each other in the mirror and laughed. That's when it became clear. They weren't trying to get me to forgive Alyssa. They were trying to shame me into compliance. I finally texted my mom back one sentence. If she apologizes directly to Martin, I'll consider talking. No reply, because Alyssa doesn't apologize, ever, not when she's wrong, especially not to other women. Then came the cousin brigade. Texts from people I hadn't heard from in years. Long-winded messages with fake warmth like, "Hey, haven't talked in a while, but I just wanted to say." All of them trying to soften me, convince me, remind me how close the family used to be. How Alyssa always looked up to me. How this was just a bad moment, a misstep, a misunderstanding. One even wrote, "You know how she is. You're the stable one. We're counting on you to pull this back together." There it was. You're the stable one. That line pissed me off more than anything. Because yeah, I've always been the stable one. the one who shows up, pays on time, fixes what breaks, swallows every insult for the sake of keeping things peaceful. And they expected me to do it again like clockwork. But I wasn't doing it this time. Not after what she did to Martin. Not after everything I've carried for years, while Alyssa spun chaos and expected parades in return. So I started making moves. I called the university and confirmed what I already knew. Her place was gone. Final payment deadline had passed. Her spot had already been offered to the next person on the list. Then I found out something interesting. Her campus housing had been tied to enrollment, which meant she had 2 weeks to vacate. She hadn't told anyone that yet. So I waited. And on the 6th day after the wedding, I got the first message from Alyssa herself. Just a thumbs up emoji. That's all. No words, no explanation. Just a thumbs up, like this was some kind of joke. Like everything unraveling in her life was still beneath her, still somehow my fault. I didn't respond, but I knew what was coming. Because she hadn't hit bottom yet, and I was done catching her fall. Day 7, 1 week after the wedding. The first call from Alyssa finally came through. I let it go to voicemail. I wanted to see what tone she'd take. She didn't disappoint. There was no apology, no mention of the wine. She just said she heard the account got frozen and that there must have been some kind of glitch. Said she was calling because the rent office at her student housing was being weird and asked me to just clear it up real quick, as if we were business partners. I didn't reply. But the next morning, she texted again saying, "They're telling me I have to move out by Friday. Seriously? You're going to let that happen?" Yes, I was. I don't know what she expected. Maybe some tearful breakdown from me. Maybe Martin guilt-tripping me into being the bigger person. But that's not how this was going. Martin, for his part, had been watching the whole thing unfold with this quiet strength. He never told me what to do. He didn't need to. We were aligned. But then something unexpected happened. Alyssa posted a photo on Instagram, not one of those vague, dramatic quotes people use when they're spiraling. This was her smiling, holding a glass of wine again, with the caption, "Some people are great at pretending." Wine glass emoji. Guess I learned from the best, and she tagged me. That's when I realized she didn't just think she could talk her way out of this. She thought she could publicly control the story, make me look petty, heartless, cold. I didn't respond. But a few hours later, I got a DM from a former coworker saying, "Hey, saw your sister's post. Everything okay?" And that's when I flipped a switch. I didn't argue. I didn't post back. I did something much worse. I contacted the scholarship foundation she had been bragging about all year, the one she applied to last minute after I nudged her through the process. What she didn't know was that my letter of support had helped push it through. I had vouched for her stability, maturity, character. So I emailed them to withdraw my endorsement. I didn't even have to lie. I simply included a copy of the university's withdrawal notice and let them know I could no longer support her participation in the program. They asked a few questions. I answered politely, professionally. By the next afternoon, she was dropped from the scholarship too. She found out almost instantly. Called me 3 times back to back. This time I picked up. She didn't even try to mask the panic. She said I'd ruined her future, that I was jealous of her potential, that she had plans, real ones, and now everything was falling apart because I was being vindictive. I didn't say anything, just let the silence hang. Then she asked what it would take. Money, a public apology, me letting her post something for clarity. She was trying to negotiate like this was a business transaction. I told her there was nothing she could offer. She said, "You're not serious. This is your sister." And I said, "Yeah, that used to mean something." Then I hung up. By Friday, she was officially evicted from the dorms. I didn't hear where she ended up. My mom tried to guilt me again that weekend. Sent a photo of Alyssa sitting on a friend's couch with her belongings and trash bags around her. But I noticed something in the background. One of the boxes had my handwriting on it. From last year. That's when I remembered I'd packed it for her when she moved into school the first time, labeled everything, folded her clothes. I sat there staring at the photo and realized how much of my life had gone into holding hers together. Not anymore. By the end of that week, it wasn't just Alyssa unraveling anymore. It was the whole damn family. First came the group texts. A cousin thread suddenly reignited after a year of silence, full of vague check-ins and thinking of you messages that weren't fooling anyone. Then the real tone slipped in. Things like family is all we have, and maybe there's a way to meet halfway. Then my aunt chimed in. She said, Alicia, we don't know what happened, but freezing someone's life like this, it's not okay. Alyssa might have made a mistake, but this is extreme. Extreme? The word made me laugh. No one called it extreme when I paid for her food after she maxed her card at Trader Joe's. No one said it was extreme when she showed up drunk to my graduation and told Martin she was surprised someone like him could handle me. No one had a single word for all of that. But now, when I stopped protecting her, suddenly I was the villain. That's when it really sank in. This wasn't about what was fair or right. This was about the system, the roles we had always played. Alyssa was the unstable one, the one people worried about, catered to, forgave. I was the responsible one, the safety net, and I had cut the net. So the whole structure was shaking. My dad finally texted me privately. He didn't yell or argue. He just asked one question. Do you want a relationship with your family or not? That hit harder than I expected because until that moment, I hadn't considered what this was going to cost long term. But the second I read that message, I realized something cold and clear. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted reset. Back to me paying, me fixing, me absorbing. And if I didn't agree to that, then I was the problem. So I answered honestly, not like this. He didn't reply. Then came the real curveball. Martin's parents reached out. His mom called and asked if everything was okay. I thought someone had told them something, but no. It was just Martin who'd mentioned in passing that we were dealing with some family stuff. But his mom knew right away what that meant. She said, "It's your wedding week. The people who are supposed to love you most just showed you who they really are. Don't ignore that." I couldn't. That weekend, we had dinner with Martin's parents. Calm, simple, honest conversation. We told them everything. No drama, just facts. His dad, who's normally quiet, leaned back and said, "Well, sounds like you're finally done playing the role they wrote for you." I nodded. And then he asked the question I wasn't expecting. "So, what are you going to do next?" I'd been so focused on pulling away from Alyssa, from the system, that I hadn't thought about what came after. But I already had the answer, because I had one last card to play. I waited until Monday morning. Alyssa still hadn't reached out again after the call, probably because she figured she'd already burned every bridge. But the truth was, she hadn't even seen the fire yet, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting to her chaos. I was creating my own. I called the academic advisor at the university, the one who used to CC me on all of Alyssa's communications. She remembered me. I asked one question. Had Alyssa applied for re-enrollment yet? She hadn't, not even tried, which meant she had nothing. No housing, no scholarship, no classes, no job, and she still hadn't told our parents the full truth. I could tell because if they knew how far it had gone, they'd be calling again. Instead, silence. But I knew that wouldn't last. Tuesday, 8:03 a.m., Alyssa showed up at my apartment. I didn't answer the door. She stood outside for 12 minutes, knocked twice. I watched her through the peephole, arms crossed, still pretending like she wasn't unraveling. Then finally, she slid something under the door. A letter, handwritten. It wasn't an apology. It was a list. Literally a list of things she needed to get back on track. Tuition total, rent estimate, even a line about 6 months of stability until I can transfer credits. At the bottom, she wrote, "I know you don't owe me this, but I'm asking anyway." That line stuck with me, not because it was sincere, but because it meant for the first time she actually knew. She knew I didn't owe her anymore. I left the letter on the floor. The next day, she called our mom and finally told her everything. How she lost her enrollment, the dorm eviction, the scholarship, everything. My mom called me that night, sobbing. She said, "She's scared, Alicia. She's never been like this. You don't know what she's like right now." And I said, "I know exactly what she's like." Then I said the one sentence they'd never heard from me in my entire life. "I'm not helping her. Not this time, not next time, not ever again." She didn't scream. She just cried. Said something about how she didn't raise us to be this divided. I told her she raised us to believe I'd always fix what Alyssa broke. And now she was seeing what happened when I didn't. Later that week, I got another letter from Alyssa. This time it was shorter, just one paragraph. No numbers, no begging. Just this. "I get it now. You really won't save me anymore. I don't know what to do." That was the closest thing to an apology she's ever given me. But by then, it didn't matter anymore. I didn't reply. I just folded the letter and put it in a drawer. Not out of sentiment, but as a reminder. Because people like Alyssa don't change when they hurt you. They change when you stop cushioning the fall. And I was done playing the net. 3 weeks went by. The quiet was almost unsettling. No calls, no texts, no updates from my parents. Even Alyssa's social media went dark. Radio silence, like she'd dropped off the map. Part of me thought maybe she left the state, ran back to some friend group, or couch hopped until she could land somewhere soft again. But that wasn't what happened. Because on a random Thursday morning, Martin got a knock on the door. It wasn't Alyssa. It was her ex, Jason. I barely recognized him. He looked worse than I remembered. Thin, tired, like life had been chewing on him for a while and finally started to swallow. Martin called for me quietly, and I came to the door wondering why the hell this guy was suddenly back in our orbit. He said he didn't want any drama, said he'd run into Alyssa 2 nights earlier. She was living in a pay-by-the-week motel on the edge of town. That alone should have been shocking. But what came next made my stomach twist. She told him she was pregnant. I didn't say anything at first, just stared at him. Because what are you supposed to say to something like that? I didn't even believe it. Not because I thought she wouldn't lie, but because I didn't think she'd use that. Jason said she didn't ask him for anything. Not money, not help, just said she needed to tell someone. And then he looked at me and said something that knocked the air out of my lungs. She said you're still the only person who's ever really taken care of her, and she knows she ruined it. Then he pulled a piece of paper out of his jacket, a folded-up printout from some clinic. No official letterhead. Just a form, the kind that gets handed to you in a small waiting room. Pregnancy confirmed, 6 weeks. Martin stood behind me, quiet. Jason handed it to me like it was some cursed object he didn't want to hold anymore. Then he left. No questions, no requests. Just said, "I thought you'd want to know," and disappeared. I closed the door, sat down at the kitchen table, unfolded the paper, just stared at it. And I didn't feel what I expected to feel. Not anger, not guilt. I felt relief. Because now I knew this wasn't just about tuition, or wine, or scholarships. This was Alyssa's entire life unraveling, and she wasn't reaching out to manipulate me anymore. She was spiraling, completely and quietly. Martin sat beside me. He didn't say anything either. Eventually, I folded the paper and put it in the same drawer with the letter. That drawer is getting full. I didn't tell my parents. Not yet. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because for once, it wasn't my job to fix, explain, or absorb it. Let them find out on their own. This time I was done cushioning anything. That weekend passed in silence. No new texts, no veiled guilt trips, no passive-aggressive photos from my mom. Just stillness. And then Monday morning hit. The first message came from a second cousin I hadn't spoken to in over a year. "Hey, just checking in. Hope everything's good. I heard there's been some tension. Let me know if you ever want to talk." Right. It wasn't a check-in. It was a probe. Within hours, another cousin messaged me, this one a little bolder. "Family fights are tough, but we all make mistakes. Alyssa told me some of what's been going on. Just want to say I'm here if you want to vent." Then the group chat exploded again. Vague posts about unity, love, forgiveness. But no one said her name. No one mentioned what she did. Not one person brought up the wine or the dress or the smirk she wore while I stood there drenched in red in front of everyone I loved. They just wanted it to go away. They wanted me to go back to being quiet. They were circling the wagons, not around the truth, but around the roles they were comfortable with. Alyssa was still the fragile one. I was the one who kept things steady. And steady people don't make noise. They absorb it. Except I wasn't absorbing anymore. A few days later, I got a package in the mail. No return address, but the handwriting was hers. Inside was a framed photo of us as kids. A sticky note on the back. "I don't remember why we stopped being close." That line made me laugh. Not because it was funny. Because it was classic Alyssa, rewriting history to avoid responsibility. We didn't stop being close. She pushed. And I yielded, over and over again, until one day I didn't. One day I didn't respond. I wrapped the photo in bubble wrap and tucked it away in a closet. Later that afternoon, Martin came home with 2 coffees. We sat on the couch in the quiet, and he finally asked the question he'd been holding for days. "Are you okay?" I thought about it, really thought about it. I said, "I think I'm starting to be." Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't managing anyone's damage but my own. And even though it hurt, God, it hurt. I wasn't drowning in it. I was learning to stand in it, let it pass through instead of pressing it down. That night I wrote a letter, not to Alyssa, to myself. I listed every time I had picked her up, every loan, every ride, every time I skipped something for her sake. I wrote until my hand ached. Then I folded it, sealed it, and put it in the drawer with everything else. I didn't do it for closure, I did it to remember. Because I knew how easy it would be to forget once she started spinning her next version of the story. Once people came calling again. Once someone asked me to be the bigger person. I needed to have a record. Proof. Not of what she did, but of what I had carried. A few days later, Martin got another message, this time from Jason. Just 2 lines. She's gone. She left town. No idea where, no explanation, just left. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the screen, not crying, not panicked, just quiet. Because part of me knew it would end like this. Alyssa didn't know how to fix things. She only knew how to flee them. Martin put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Whatever happens next, you don't owe her your peace." And I believed him. A week went by, then 2, then 4. My parents stayed mostly quiet. My mom sent me a thinking of you text on a Sunday morning. My dad sent a link to a random article he thought I'd find interesting. Neither of them mentioned Alyssa. Neither of them asked how I was doing, not really. And honestly, I was glad for it. Because what they didn't realize, what most people didn't realize, was that my silence wasn't anger. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't even grief. It was freedom. Freedom from being her scapegoat. Freedom from being their fixer. Freedom from the narrative that said I had to carry the weight of someone else's self-destruction just because we shared a bloodline. That freedom was quiet, lonely, sometimes, but it was mine. Martin and I started planning a trip, just the 2 of us, somewhere we'd never been, somewhere far from this place and all its ghosts. And one night, as we were going through flight options, he looked at me and said, "You did what nobody else could." I asked, "What's that?" He said, "You finally let her fall." I didn't say anything for a while, just let those words sit in the space between us. Then I said, "I just hope she figures out how to stand." Because as much as I no longer wanted to be her safety net, I didn't want her to break either. I wanted her to grow. But whether she did or not, that wasn't my burden anymore. Weeks passed, then months. No word, no new posts, no updates. It was like Alyssa had vanished off the face of the earth. Every once in a while, I'd catch my mom lingering in conversation, hesitating like she was about to bring her up, then choosing not to. My dad stopped asking questions altogether, and I didn't offer answers. I had no idea where Alyssa was. I didn't try to find out. Some nights, I still thought about the photo on her friend's couch, the trash bags, the list she'd slid under my door, the baby. That part stayed with me, quiet and heavy. Martin asked once, "Do you think she went through with it?" I told him the truth. I don't know, and I don't think I'm supposed to. Because that part of her life, the part she tried to drag me back into with a smirk and a wine glass and a tag on Instagram, it didn't belong to me anymore. I had let it go. Instead, I focused on us, on rebuilding the part of my life that had nothing to do with her, on making space for joy that wasn't clouded by obligation. We traveled, we hosted friends, we found a rhythm that felt light, unburdened, and real. Still, sometimes I'd open that drawer. The letter, the clinic form, the list. Proof that I hadn't imagined the weight I carried. Proof that I'd done enough, that I'd tried over and over until trying meant betraying myself. One afternoon, almost 5 months after the wedding, I got a text from an unknown number. "Hope you're well. I'm safe. That's all. A." No explanation, no apology, just that. I didn't reply. Martin saw the message. He didn't ask what I planned to do. He knew I wouldn't do anything. And that, more than anything, is what made me realize I had changed. Because even a year ago, that message would have kept me up all night, would have pushed me to respond, to fix, to re-engage. But now I just looked at the screen, set the phone down, and went back to the life I built without her in it. Because healing doesn't always look like a conversation. Sometimes it's silence, a clear boundary, a door that stays closed, not out of cruelty, but clarity. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't angry, I wasn't scared, I was free. The last time I opened the drawer, I took everything out. The letters, the paper from the clinic, the notes, the photo. I didn't rip them, I didn't burn them, I didn't do anything dramatic. I just put them in an envelope, sealed it, and tucked it into a box of things from my old life. The one where I was still her net, still the fixer, still the version of me everyone needed me to be. Then I closed the box and moved it to the back of the closet. Not forgotten, just no longer in reach. Martin came home that night with groceries. We made dinner together, danced in the kitchen, to music we both forgot we liked, And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to fall apart. I felt whole. Because sometimes walking away isn't the end of the story. Sometimes it's the only way to begin your own.